So welcome to Avodas HaParsha here in beautiful Me'er Avram and beautiful Shari Chesed with the beautiful Tzibur here. So tonight we're going to be looking into one aspect of Yisro, and again, like everything, once I start looking into it, I'm amazed at how big it is. There's like nothing you go into in Torah. So one of the major questions is, well, I'll tell you first just a cute word. It says, Vayishma Yisro Kohen Midyon Chosin Moshe, right? And in previous years, I don't know if in this format, I've given a shir about why they identify Yisro as Kohen Midyon. That would seem to go the opposite of what it says, Onoas Hager, to say hurtful words to Hager, is Chor Masecha Rishonim. Remember what you did. So Simcha Zissel Brody, who we're going to be learning from tonight, he has a whole piece on that idea. So it says that Yisro heard, welcome Dr. Schuster, and what did he hear? Rashi brings down from Chazal, Mash Shmua Shama Ubo. What was this that he heard that got him to come? Kriyas Yamsuf and Milchemes Amalek, the splitting of the sea and Milchemes Amalek. Now, a few psukim later, right, when Moshe Rabbeinu greets him, so it says, Vayisaper Moshe lechosno eis kol asher asa Hashem leparo lemitzrayim. He told him everything that Hashem did with Paro and Mitzrayim, right? And what is this? It says, one second. Right? It said that he told him about Kriyas Yamsuf and Milchemes Amalek again. Right? So the question is, why did Yisro react with such exaltation? And he said, Baruch Hashem asher yitzil eschem mitachas yad Mitzrayim Paro. You already knew this. So I saw it in the context of the Haggadah. That's the difference between hearing a story. It says, Vayesaper Moshe, or hearing a Shmua. Moshe Rabbeinu, who was there, told the story. And that moved Yisro in a way that just hearing on the news service, that Am Yisrael came out, and those things don't move. So that's supposed to be the way. Mitzvah l'saper b'yitzias Mitzrayim is different than the mitzvah of Zechiras Yitzias Mitzrayim, which we have every day. There it's supposed to be told like a story, and a story that, so to speak, we actually went through. Okay, now, one of the major topics about Yisro that you find is, when did he come? When did he come? Did he come before Matan Torah, or did he come after Matan Torah? And you find in the Rishonim and the Achronim, it's a whole battle royale going on there with bringing rayas from here and questions there, etc. Added to that is the Parshan Baloscha, where Moshe Rabbeinu speaks to Chovov, right, who is another name for Yisro, and he asks him, he says, come along with us to Eretz Yisrael. And Yisro says, look, Kim el artzi vel moladati elech. He says, I'm going back to my land. And the question is, why? And did he actually end up coming? So, according to most opinions, he didn't come. The Ramban says it actually did. The Ramban has a fascinating thing. He says, Yisro did go back the first time he said he was going to go back. But then Moshe Rabbeinu picked him up again as they were getting close to Eretz Yisrael. They passed near Midyan. So he went to the Shver, he said, come, now we're really going in. But some said he was worried he wouldn't have a chelik in Eretz Yisrael. Moshe Rabbeinu said that he would, and we see that the Bnei Akeni, which is the descendants of Yisro, were given part of the area around Yericho. Some people are actually critical of Yisro, that he was afraid of war, of the war that would be there to conquer in Eretz Yisrael, or he was afraid of leaving his possessions. I had never heard that criticism before. And again, it doesn't take away from the greatness that we see here in the Parsha that he did. But it's something I wondered, this is food for thought, it suddenly hit me when I saw some criticism that he didn't go. There was a Rav of Kloisenberg, not the Kloisenberger Rebbe, but he was the Rav of the city at the same time, Rav Akiva Glasner, his name was. He says, compared to Rus, Boaz praises her, Asher Bos Lachsos Tachas Kanfi Ashchina, you came here to Eretz Yisrael to come under the wings of the Shechina. So it's like a contrast, right? There's an idea of she could have understood the truth and stayed in Midyan, but actually coming there. I was wondering, I've never met somebody Jewish with the Hebrew name Yisro. Isn't that an interesting food for thought? In English, there are people called Jethro, right? But not one Yisro I've ever encountered. And he is a very, very significant figure to the extent not many people get a Parsha in the Torah named after them. And yet we don't see that name. I'm giving it as food for thought, right? It's an interesting question. Okay, so let's look now to the Ramban. Ramban asks, what you call kind of a bomb question. If Yisro came after Matan Torah, why didn't Moshe Rabbeinu tell him about Matan Torah? In other words, he tells him about Kriyas Yamsuf, Melchemes Amalek, but all of that was just a lead up to Matan Torah, which was the most significant event in the world. He tried some different answers, to fit that in to the Shita of Yisro coming after Matan Torah. One of them is that he came while the excitement was still there. In other words, Am Yisrael was still camped by Har Sinai, and he picked it all up live from everyone, so Moshe Rabbeinu didn't have to tell him. The other things occurred previously, but bottom line, the Ramban says, HaKorov Elai Litva.
How long the walk is it from
Midian? I don't know. I don't know the map at all. I would think that none of these things are that far. In other words, Rus walked from Midian to Eretz Yisrael, Rus and Nomi. I was once on a tiyul in Midbar Yehuda, and they had us standing on a cliff, and they said this is the path that they would have walked from here, from Midian to get here to Eretz Yisrael. Yeah, that was a tour guide. He could have told me anything, he could have told me, so they also showed us the cliff with the Azazel, everything. So the Ramban says, HaKorov Elai Litva Seder HaTorah. He says, bottom line, it seems the most close, the most accurate parish is that he did come before Matan Torah, right? That he did come before Matan Torah. Rav Simcha Zissel Brody, who was a Rosh Yeshiva in the Chevron Yeshiva for many, many years, he grew up in Yerushalayim, but he joined the Chevron Yeshiva, and he gave famous perushim on the Ramban. So he says he would like to propose his own approach to it, right? In other words, to why, perhaps even if it was after Matan Torah, what was emphasized was Kriyas Yamsuf and Melchemes Amalek. He says what the Torah wants us to pay attention to is 3 reactions to hearing the same event. Okay, in other words, says, when you had the miracles of Kriyas Yamsuf, we see in the Psukim in Oz Yosher, we saw last week, right, that everyone was shaken up by this, right? This shook everybody up in the world. This was something, especially if you add in the Medrash, that any water in the world split. Somebody who was sipping tea, right, it split, right? Somebody in his bathtub, it split, everything split. There's something there that shook up the world. Shomu Amim Yirgozun, okay? Yirgozun means that they actually shook from it. But the reaction, we see no particular follow-up from the rest of the world. Meaning they shook, they were shocked, and they went back to life. That's reaction number 1. Reaction number 2 is the reaction of Amalek, which it influenced him to actually attack Am Yisrael. That's somewhat the perversion of Amalek, meaning he has the antennas to recognize chashivus, he has the antennas to recognize something very special, something elevated, something exalted, but that just makes him want to bring it down. Okay, that's why Amalek is called in Mishlei, the pasuk in Mishlei, Leitz take upeti yarim. Hit the leitz, and the peti means the one who can be convinced will become clever. The leitz is Amalek. The peti, they say, is Yisro. Now, why is Amalek called the letz? Right? We tend to think of a letz as a joker, right? But nothing particularly funny about wanting to kill us. So Rav Hutner explains that the idea of leitzonos is a person that cannot stand the presence of chashivus, of something important, of something exalted. And he will do anything to bring that down, even if he's going to suffer. As it was, that's the famous mashal of the hot bathtub, right? In other words, it says, Am Yisrael coming out of Mitzrayim were like a boiling hot bathtub. a bubbling hot bathtub, hotter than those hot mikvahs that the old guys like, right? They say, that's a special. This one, it was so hot. Nobody was thinking of going into that bathtub. They were all afraid. Came Leitz Echad, one Leitz came and he jumped in and he ran out screaming with burns. But he cooled down the bathtub. That became an idiom in Hebrew. It's tanena batya. He cooled down the bathtub, meaning it's not so hot anymore. Meaning nobody thought of attacking Am Yisrael. Now you see, they can be attacked. It's true, he lost, but there are people who can be attacked. So that is the second reaction, that reaction of Amalek. The third reaction was Yisro, who came to be Mizgayer and to join Am Yisrael. Okay, so he says this is what we're supposed to take a look at and understand. The first reaction, it's interesting, brought to mind a story that of Mordechai Gifter, who grew up in America, and he was one of those very few young men who went back to Eastern Europe to learn in yeshiva. He went to the Telz yeshiva. So when he arrived into the yeshiva, he met with the Rosh Yeshiva there. It was Rabbi Avram Yitzchok Bloch. And the Rosh Yeshiva asked him, how was his trip? He said, I have to ask something. I saw something that confused me very much. The ship that I traveled on, they had a lot of parties going on all the time. People are dancing and singing and drinking. And suddenly the ship hit really rough weather, really rough. And people were frightened and they were crying and all these things. And then the storm stopped, the weather cleared, and they went back to drinking and dancing. So Rabbi Avram Yitzchak told him, he said, das ist a mensch. He said, that's what a person is. We do the same, right? In other words, you can have something, you get shaken up so much, but then, okay, Baruch Hashem, it's over, right? And then you go on with life. We have the ability to do that. That was reaction number one that the Torah wants us to see and understand, to contrast Yisro's reaction to that. The reaction of Amalek, of the Leitzanos, that we saw. And he says, all of this is an illustration of a principle, and he writes about it in his Sfarim multiple times, that Chazal referred to from the Pasuk, Yesharim darchei Hashem, the pathways of Hashem are straight, Tzadikim yelchu bam, Tzadikim will follow in their straight path, Uposhim yikoshlu bam, and wrongdoers will trip on them, will stumble on them. And an example from the very beginning of the Chumash is brought in the Gemara. It says, Vayomer Elokim nase odom. Hashem said, the famous line, let us make man. All right, and the question is, who's us? Right? If Hashem echad, so who's us? Okay, so Chazal say that he said this to the Malachim. Even though they did not participate in the creation, right? He wanted to teach us derech eretz and midas hanova. The way of proper behavior and humility is to consult with those around you, to get them on board, right, to talk about this. Now, the danger is that minim, those people who want to attack our central beliefs, will say, clearly there are two forces here. Right? There's at least one other God. There's Nase Adam. So the Gemara's answer is, Yisharim darchei Hashem. The path of Hashem is straight. He wanted to teach us something important in Derech Eretz. Tzadikim yelchu bam. Tzadikim will look at that and they will continue on in the straight path. Rishayim yikoshel bam. Suddenly, right, they're saying that there's no one God. He says this is part of the chesed that Hashem did when He created the world, that we have the ability to choose. We'll always have the ability to choose. No matter what happens, even if it's something miraculous, even if it's something supernatural, we'll always have the ability to go this way or that way with it. Without it, we wouldn't be able to have choice. So, for example, he says, the psukim seem to say that it should be natural. If you look at creation, you feel the presence of God, right? Pasuk in Tehillim, Hashamayim besaprim kvod kel. The heavens tell the covet of Hashem, Maaseh Yodav Magid Arakia. The Arakia, right, the firmament, what they call, talks about, testifies the fact that it was created by Hashem. In Yeshayahu, Se'u meromei nechem, lift up your eyes to the heavens. Umi bara elah, you look, you see who created this. I remember Volba once saying, I think I heard this from him personally, he said that he was told that the first astronaut, like when they went out into space and were able to look at Earth from space, so he like blurted out, he was apparently knew some Bible, and he said, how wondrous are your ways, O Lord, meaning, Marabu Masech Hashem. So he said, I wish, he said, he'd been a Jew. He said, if a guy reacted that way, just imagine what a Jew would have said, having seen it like that. So he says, all those things are there. However, other people can look at the same thing and not see anything. Okay? And that's what David HaMelech tells us. We say in Mizmor Shir Yom HaShabbos, Ma godlu ma'asecha Hashem, ma'od amku ma'achshu Hashem, your deeds are so great, your thoughts are so deep. Ish ba'ar lo yeda, u'sil lo yavinazos. But a person without understanding will not know. A fool will not understand. You always have the ability to look and to come out to another conclusion. And obviously, it depends on what you want the conclusion to be often. Right? They tell a joke about a man who wanted to hire an accountant. So the interviews come, an accountant walks in, says one question, what's 2 plus 2? Says 4. Thank you very much. Next accountant, what's 2 plus 2? 4. Thank you. Finally, one comes in, he says, what's 2 plus 2? He said, what would you like it to be? You're my accountant. Okay, so a lot of times it depends when you look at something, but HaKadosh Baruch Hu always left the room for you to explain it away, for you to have some excuse. I saw Rav Gedalia Shur explained like this. We say that the name of Hashem, Shin, Dalet, and Yud, right, Shakai, stands for Sha'amar le'olamo dai, that he said to his world, enough. What is that? Chazal said, Shahaya olam misrachiv u'misrachiv. When Hashem set something into motion in creation, it went and grew and went and grew. And at one point Hashem said, enough. What was the enough point? The enough point was, he said, where if you look at the universe, you could see Hashem if you want to, or you cannot see him if you don't want to. That's the balancing point. Right, that's the point that has to be there, that a person can do. Rav Hutner used to say, there's a little poem, song by Reb Levi Yitzchak Berdichev. Right, they called the Dudele, because he would say, Mizrach do, Ma'ariv do, Tzafon do, right, Daram do, right, which means, right, Hashem, you're in the east, you're in the west, you're above, you're below, right, north, south, it's all you. He says there are people who sing a dudel, right, Yitzchak, but there are also people who sing an ichele, right, Mizrach ich, Ma'ariv ich, Tzafon ich, right, meaning east me, north me, south me, it's all me. We are able to convince ourselves of this. We saw Paro when we learned a bit about him, right, that he was able to think that he was the center of the world. So he says, this is something that we have to notice, this idea that HaKadosh Baruch Hu built it into the world, and this is one of the major lessons we're supposed to learn from Yetzias Mitzrayim. I'll just bring one more example from the beginning of the Torah. This member of Nebenzel Shlita pointing this out to us. With Migdal Bavel, that very mysterious Parsha of the Tower of Babel, right? And it started up, it said that they had some joint opinion. Vayikol Eretz Sofa Achas Udvarim Achodim. They had one language and they had one idea, and that led them to build this tower. What is it? So they bring from Breshis Rabbah, Rashi brings Achas elef v'tofresh nun vav shonim harakia mismotek. They said, let's think. A flood happened in the world, big, major, catastrophic flood. That was after 1,000 and tofresh nun vav, right, years of the world. So that's probably a cycle. That's probably some kind of natural cycle. And we better get ready, because in another 1,000 and Tafresh Nun Vav years, right, the whole sky's going to fall apart and it's going to flood again. We got to start building something that's going to present that. He says, rather than look at the fact, right, that the world was full of Hamas and evil and robbery and persecution, and therefore, and Noach told them, if you don't change your ways, it's going to be destroyed, and it was destroyed. Yeah, whatever. This has got to be some kind of natural phenomenon, right, that we have to get the technology that can protect us at the time. Again, the ability that HaKadosh Baruch Hu left for people for self-deception. So now when it comes to Yetzias Mitzrayim, he says, if you pay attention, it's a major theme. When it came we had to makas b'choros. Vayomer Moshe ko amar Hashem, kachatzos halayla ani yotzei mitoch Mitzrayim. Okay, it says, Moshe says, so says Hashem, kachatzos halayla. Around midnight, I'm going to be going out into Mitzrayim. So Rashi says, what is this kachatzos? Right, that Moshe said, the mashma, samuch lo, near midnight, maybe before, maybe after. So he said, why did he do that? Hashem, obviously, if Hashem says midnight, it's midnight. He says, Shema yitu itzdagnine paro. Maybe Paro's astrologers, they would be wrong. And they would take a look, and Makas Bechoros is starting, they look at their watch, it's 12:10, Moshe, right? You messed up. He says, how insane can that be? Right? In other words, right, you have Bechorim dying all across Mitzrayim. It said Mitzrayim were screaming, crying, the firstborn were dying, and they said, Moshe, you're fake. You're fake. He said, midnight's not midnight. How could a person do that? Why would it make a difference? Again, a person can deceive themselves, right? You can somehow try to diffuse everything that is there. So we have to understand that force in ourselves and in others. And now when it came to Kriyas Mitzrayim as well, why did Paro chase after them? After 10 makas, why did he chase after them? I saw that actually as one explanation also of why Yisro came after hearing about Kriyas Yamsuf and Milchemes Amalek, because both of those were examples of incredible stupidity, right? Saying Paro coming after the Jewish people after 10 makos is really ridiculous. Amalek attacking Am Yisrael with the clouds around them and all these things and the pillar of fire, also insane. So Yisro said, even though I reached the truth sitting here in Midian, I realized that people cannot rely on their own intellect. A person can end up doing incredibly stupid things. I have to go and actually join with Am Yisrael and connect with Moshe Rabbeinu and hear about the Torah. I need more than just my own intellectual investigations, because our minds can be incredibly creative and can cause us to do things that are very, very illogical. So here, what brought Paro to jump, here he's asking what brought Paro to actually go into the water after Am Yisrael. Right? In other words, the water split for Am Yisrael, a very supernatural looking thing. It was clearly for Am Yisrael. Why would they think, oh cool, we'll hitch a ride with Am Yisrael and go through there and we'll be okay? So he says, because the Torah preceded the description of the splitting with Vayet Moshe's Yodo al Hayom. Moshe Rabbeinu stretched his hand out by the sea. Vayolech Hashem es Hayom beruach kodim. And Hashem caused the sea to move with an east wind. Okay? Why? So he says, the Ramban says, Hayarotzim lefon of Yisbarach, Hashem wanted to do it with a east wind that dries things out, so that it was that this was some kind of natural fluke that happened. Right? Whoa, that's a strong east wind. Looks like it's, drying out this pathway here, and the Mitzrayim would go through there. Okay? They didn't think that it was Hashem doing it for Am Yisrael. They thought it was some kind of natural fluke that Am Yisrael took advantage of, and they would take advantage of as well. By the way, this is something that is discussed many times. Lots of people like to bring this up, theories about what could cause, the sandbar to rise in the middle of the Red Sea and things like this. They say that they told the Baal Shem Tov such a theory. He says, Elokim, I'm not good at gematrias. It works when Elokim equals HaTeva, or Elokim equals Teva, something like that, meaning nature is simply a manifestation of HaKadosh Baruch Hu's power. So you want to say it was through some natural force like wind. The Torah says it was wind that did it. Doesn't make it any less God, divine and miraculous. So here it says, despite the fact that the odds were that this was not just some natural thing that happened at the moment Am Yisrael needed to escape from them, but their desire to catch up to Am Yisrael to do this caused them to think that. Hashem left the area in there for them to be able to make the mistake. And if you have some ulterior motive that you want it to be that way, you'll go with it. Okay? So that a person has the ability to do. And then all the things that seem miraculous, Simply aren't. So this is part of what we're supposed to learn from Yetzias Mitzrayim. These Parshas that we're supposed to go to, again, the Ramban said in the end of Parshas Bo that all the 10 Makkos showed the falsehood of all the theories that people had about the powers in the world, the creator of the world, if he had ability to change the world, if he cares about the world, if he's involved in the world. All of those things were debunked. But as we see, didn't really change people, didn't really do much. So for Am Yisrael, we are supposed to be going over this story again and again. Again, this is one of the important lessons. Again, people think we're supposed to remember Yetzias Mitzrayim. Hashem took Israel out of Mitzrayim. We're supposed to remember every detail, every theme, everything that was revealed here. So Simcha Zissel says what was revealed to us here was the ability of people to deceive themselves. And therefore, we want Yisro to be placed in contrast, the reaction of the nations of the world who kind of said, yeah, whatever. The reaction of Amalek, who went into this frenzy to try and attack it. And Yisro, who actually came and felt, I need to join with Am Yisrael. Yisro was a seeker of truth from the very beginning. And that's why they said he served every Avodas in the world. That was something praiseworthy for him because he was searching for the truth. And he came and he joined. He understood the message of what was happening, and he took action with it, and he understood how it relates to Am Yisrael. So Simcha Zissel finished, he said, in our era, whenever he said over this year, he said, it's so obvious, the Hashgacha of Hashem, and the miracles that are surrounding Am Yisrael, and nonetheless, the power of blindness is very great as well for people to say, no, it's not God. It's just, we're so smart, or, something like this that happened on. So he says, that's why if you want the living example of the fact that we're able to do this, that's why we must go over these Parshas again and again and walk the path of Yisro and not that of the others. Okay, have a wonderful, wonderful week.